called Jagare. And then the family moved to Viljandi, called Felin. It was a little town between Dorpat and Perno.
Which was in Estonia.
It was in Estonia. He went there. There was a very small Jewish community and a very small shul. And my father grew up there and went to school there. The problem that he faced, and his father, my grandfather, faced, is that Viljandi did not have a high school. And the closest high school was Dorpat. And the problem with Dorpat, that was at the order of the Tsar, no Jews could live. Now the only way my grandfather succeeded in bypassing the Tsar law is by enrolling my father as an apprentice to a shoemaker. That gave him the right to go to high school. And my father went to high school. And he was an excellent student, and the director of that high school was my father's protege. And he was always encouraged my father to continue higher education. My father finished the high school with the highest in Dorpat, with the highest marks, and had a really new problem, a Jewish problem, which was to enter a university. He wanted to study medicine, and for a Jew to enter Dorpat University was one of the most difficult things, more difficult than it was for me or anybody else to enter in the modern time in a medical school. And at that time, my grandfather had a cousin who was one that was kidnapped on the street and was a Russian soldier for 25 years enlisted. He had no children, and he, the cousin of my grandfather, had the legal right to enroll his children to a Russian university. But he was not the father of my father. Therefore, it was my grandfather, who was the rabbi in the little town of Viljandi, did something which is really, I consider, thinking about it, very humiliating for him. He had to declare himself mentally insane, not able to take care of his son, and legally transformed the right to his cousin to adopt him and take care of him. My grandfather, who was a very learned man and very sharp man, did it for my father. As a result, my father succeeded in enter Tartu University at the Faculty of Medicine. After a year or two at the University of Tartu, my father succeeded to be accepted to Cologne, the Cologne University in Germany, where he completed medicine and had an excellent education. He married my mother, who was from Riga, and they both settled in Kaunas. In 1940, my father became interested in contagious diseases and was in charge of the hospital, in the Jewish hospital of the contagious disease department. In 1940, approximately 6 weeks before the World War II started, an epidemic of typhus developed in the city of Vilnius, and my father was dispatched to be in charge of the epidemic in Vilnius, where he directed the treatment of the thousands of people who got sick. On the day of the war, on a Sunday when the war broke up, that was the day when he came to Kaunas. And when he traveled in the train, he still didn't know that the war started. When the war started, he again was in charge of the contagious disease hospital in the ghetto, in Kaunas. And in August, when the Germans have ordered the movement of the Jews into the ghetto, my father had a task in organizing the contagious disease hospital in the ghetto. Now, Abraham, as you know at the time, and you were the secretary of the Judenrat, you probably know.
There was no Judenrat, there was an Ältestenrat,
I'm sorry,
a Jewish
correction.
council.
The Jewish
In
council.
Vilna there was a Judenrat, in Kovno there was not.
Okay, in the Ältestenrat, how were the mechanism and what role my father played in the beginning in the ghetto and later in the ghetto?
Yes, I mentioned on many occasions the important role that your father, Dr. Moses Browns, played in the ghetto from its very beginning, because 30,000 Jews were ordered to move in the small area of the suburb of Slobodka, which was inhabited about 8,000 normally, and now 30,000 Jews had to be squeezed in a impossible density, and this created the first big problems of contagious diseases, because Slobodka was a very famous suburb from the point of view of Talmud, of Torah, and big scholars of world fame. But it was one of the most neglected suburbs. There was no sewage, no water, not any elementary installations, and that's why there was no, for instance, toilets. There was not such houses. The houses were small ones, one story houses of wooden. There were in all of Slobodka were approximately 2 or 3 big houses of 3-story houses with brick. Others were mostly wooden or 1 story or 2 stories. So this in itself brought about it that many Jews who fled from Kovno to the ghetto didn't find their housing. And the housing department was not able to allocate houses. We don't talk about houses. We speak about a room. We speak about a part of a room, a dwelling, and this too was not so many thousands were in the streets under the sky, and others we used to house them, the roofless. We used to house them in previous synagogues or yeshivot, Talmudic seminars, but they were packed to capacity, and you get into a former school, as I did, with the head of the housing department at that time, Mitzkovich. We were looking for a place where we could install a hospital, a general hospital. So not only in the rooms the families lived, but only in the staircase, only in the toilets, in the upper floor where it was only for storage. There also lived people, and this created immediately danger for contagious diseases. The Lithuanian sanitary department of Kovno was searching where they were spying in the ghetto just to look and pick up one case of a contagious disease, of typhus or something like that. And there were such, because it was impossible. But also in this, we call them reservats, where hundreds of families lived in one place, a former yeshiva or a former synagogue. And when there happened such a thing, there was no possibility to isolate the sick one. So Dr. Browns was the one who had 2 tasks in one time. First of all, to help give medical care to the contagious sick person. Second, to isolate him from the rest of the people in the reservat, which was full packed, and where to put him at a bed that there was not such a bed, even on the ground, but to isolate him from the others. Second, he was the one who served as address for those Lithuanian municipal spies, I say, medical spies or sanitary spies, who came to Dr. Brown's and they asked him, "Oh, the situation, where are your contagious diseases?" So he said, "We don't have any." And he was duty-bound as head of the Department for Contagious Diseases to report to the municipality in Kovno, to the health department of Kovno, and they would have come. In addition, German police, Gestapo, on their own initiative, used to come to the ghetto and search. On the spot, they used to go into the reservoirs. They used to go in private houses, dwellings, in corridors, in courtyards, and everything were packed. But Dr. Browns used to take out of such places the diseases, and they found some other place in a small hut, and it was masked like as if it is just a hut, but inside in the courtyard, he dealt with them and just separated them from the others, always denying he was the buffer, I could say, who was to rebuff the attacks of the Germans, of the Lithuanians, not less than the Germans, from spying where the contagious ill people are. This was supposed to be the motive to liquidate all the ghetto, because if there is a contagious disease in the ghetto, behind at the other side of the free part of the barbed wire, there was a Lithuanian population, also in the intensity, in the very same small suburb. So they had an excuse that they would be a danger to the Lithuanian population. They would even be a danger for the German soldiers passing by. And he stood firm. First of all, it was a very big moral responsibility to cure. That we had excellent physicians in the ghetto, surgery and inner diseases and outer disease, whatever. I'm not a very specialist in medicine. But not one of them was ready to take over the risk and deal with, cure these diseases of typhus and so on. The only one who took it over, and he deserved the very great, not only respect, but the trust of the Jewish committee, the council. Dr. Elkes, the head of the Jewish council, were great friends, devoted for long years. It was a long-standing friendship, and that's why they trusted him fully. He was the man, the doctor, who was the only one whom the Jewish council relied upon to protect the ghetto inmates from, first of all, contagious diseases, in themselves a danger, and for the other one to stand courageous and steady, right, to reject and to buff back all these questions, sometimes cynical questions, sometimes provocative questions, some provocative, unexpected visits. And when Dr. Browns went in the ghetto and they met on the streets, on the small streets, and he recognized the Lithuanian physicians who came, and they knew what they came for. And he immediately just interfered. They told him, please, where are you? What are you doing? Please come. You want to see my hospital, please, and so on. But he knew them. They wanted sometimes to avoid meeting with him and to reach exactly the corpus delicti itself, the sick man who was sick with typhus. And this is a task that will be written always in the annals of the 3 years of the Kovno ghetto. I don't know of any other such person, physician, who took upon himself the daily risk of life, his own life, in fight from on both parts. This, you know, the Tsar's emblem was two heads of a oriole, of a
Eagle.
lecher.
Eagle.
Two or three. And Dr. Brown's, I could say, he had two parts of Dr. Brown's. One part devoted to his fellow inmates in the ghetto, protect them from the very diseases as a doctor, as a physician. And on the other part, the second Dr. Brown's, who stood on the outlook every day against the Germans, spies, against the warnings, the threats that they used to threat Dr. Brown's. You are personally responsible to report to us, and if you will not report, you will bear responsibility yourself. And you know what it means, responsibility. This means just death, no compromise. And I'm not exaggerating. So this is how I knew Dr. Brown's in the ghetto. I knew very well because he used to come to the, in very urgent cases, in very, especially hard cases, when 4 or 5 got sick in contagious diseases at one time, we used to find immediately to take them out from where they been and bring them in a certain place we didn't know where, because we didn't have such hotels or somewhere to bring them there. But then we used to take even a hut or something like that, take out the citizens, the inmates, and put in this under very strong. And sometimes we used to put on the outlook at this hidden clinic or hidden hospital, you see, on the outlook 2 or 3 policemen, Jewish policemen, that were on the outlook if somebody comes close, near to it. This is our new Dr. Brown's, and I cannot but end this characteristic that in the course of the years, I knew Dr. Brown's also from the 40 ghetto. He wasn't a president of Gatwe. But the ties in the friendship was really was developed in the ghetto, and it was only natural that after the liberation, when I was already in Israel, and I got word that you came to, you were in Dachau, you were in the concentration camp, and then you were in Italy, where we were together in the 1945, 1947. You stayed there until later. I made my Aliyah in October 47. So that you came to America, you succeeded to study medicine and establish yourself as a well-known physician in the United States. And then to learn from you, when you visited Israel, you came to me and told me that your father and mother were rescued, they survived, and they are in Soviet Union, and you are trying to bring them home. And what can I do for you in this case? While in Italy, I was the secretary of the clandestine Aliyah to Palestine. But we at that time already used to send our messengers inside Russia to take out from there former Zionist leaders and bring them to Italy and then to Eretz Israel. So I had all the connections, how to take out from Russia to Palestine, to Israel. And it was a fact that I was the only one in Israel that dealt with it. And when they used to come to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for help, they told them, go to Avraham Tori, to the lawyer. And they thought that I have to come to Tori and they'll pay me fees and so on. I never took a penny for that. And mind you, the President of the State of Israel, Chaim Weizmann, had a sister that remained in the Soviet Union. And then Vera Weizmann, who was a very, a lady, and she was with all the ambassadors, so she spoke with the Russian ambassador Dobrynin in New York, in Washington when she was here, and she spoke with the French ambassador there and here. And they asked, nothing came out. So then, I don't know, somehow they got word that Avraham Tori is dealing with bringing the Jews from Soviet Union to Eretz Israel. I was the first one to bring Pnina's father, who was in Siberia, exiled, to bring him, the first one in 52, to bring him from Siberia to Israel. And I had there, when I got word that he's already in Moscow, I spoke to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and they called the embassy in Moscow. They should beat him because he's a 70 years old man. Anyhow, so one of the family of the president came to my office and they asked me, could I do anything about this? And I told them, gave them one advice. If they want me to deal with, to bring the sister of the President Chaim Weizmann to Israel, lo yizacher v'lo yishamer, they should not mention a word about the president, about Chaim Weizmann, about Israel, nothing. A plain yentedvere, a woman comes, is in Russia, she has a sister, didn't mention, because Weizmann had a sister also in Israel. She has a sister, and only the sister should apply. And in her name I applied for a exit visa for this woman, and after 6 months she came to Israel. And then I got a very nice letter of President Weizmann and so on. But when your father came to Israel, came to Russia, when I told you the same thing. You cannot get your father out of the Soviet Union and bring him straight from the Soviet Union to America. I suggest to you, you'll formally live in Israel. And I took your card and I put it on my private home as if you live together with me in Israel. And I gave you the aerograms, Israeli post office, and you used to write the aerograms and send them in a closed envelope to me, and I used to put it in the post office in Tel Aviv, and the same thing your parents used to write the letters to you, but send it to Jacob Rons, Tel Aviv, 17 Nardea Street, Tel Aviv, Israel, and I used to send it to you. And by so doing, I succeeded to get the permit for your parents to come to Israel. And it happened so that when my wife went to Berkeley, where our oldest daughter was studying at university, and she was to give birth to a child, that my wife was visiting you, and you were the host, and you took her to Las Vegas, and I don't know where. At that date, I went to the airport of Lud to meet your father and mother. I took them to my home. They were speaking very slow because they shouldn't hear. Somebody wouldn't hear. This way, the way they were frightened to talk to somebody. And of course, after several months of there, you took them over to the United States. And this is the happy end of Dr. Moshe Braus with his father. And of course, our friendship continued with Dr. Braus and his wife when they were here in Los Angeles. And this friendship goes on with you and with your family. And that's the end to it.
I want to add something. We have two topics. We have topic of the ghetto and topic of getting my parents out. I like to add an interesting story to that. When Mrs. Khrushchev happened to be in the United States, I was lucky enough to be introduced to Vice President Nixon. I wrote a very passionate letter to Mrs. Nixon. I compared two mothers. She as a mother who has two sons and lost a son, and my mother who unfortunately lost my brother, one of her sons. And this passionate letter was given by President Nixon to Mrs. Khrushchev. And within 1 week, we got a permit. However, what you have done, we have really together deceived the NKVD, because my father always said when the mailman used to come, he used to scream loud on the staircase, "Dr. Braus, I have a letter from your son from Israel." So the NKVD, the KBG at that time, has not had no idea the big deception. But the moral of the story is, with your help, with President Nixon's help, with Mrs. Khrushchev's generosity and interest, we succeeded in this big project to get my parents out. Going back to the ghetto thing, I am recollecting a few things about the ghetto, which was about the period you said. First of all, my father was heartbroken when he had to take the patients from the contagious disease hospital and bring them to the ghetto. They were transported on open trucks. They were sick people with high temperature, and they were dumped on the street. It was at that time when my father has helped to organize, helped with the help of the people, because he made a small hospital of 50 beds, which was called the Contagious Disease Hospital. The people, everyone was very generous in the ghetto. They had nothing, but each found a little sheet, a little pillow, an extra bed to supply the 50-bed hospital. I personally was working in the hospital, and the hospital became a symbol of security for the people. The people who were in the hospital felt that they feel secure. And you know better, Dr. Elkes got a warning about 3 days before the tragedy in the hospital that they are planning to do something with the hospital. My father went to the hospital and tried to discharge everybody. And fortunately, the people in the hospital were not very sick. They used it mostly as a shelter, not to go to work. But nobody wanted to leave the hospital. And you describe what happened on October 4th, 1941 with this hospital, which was one of the big tragedies. My own life and my father's life was saved by the fact there was a bridge to cross to the hospital.
Upper bridge.
An upper bridge that went over the highway, over the street or highway, which was not part of the ghetto. And for some reason, my father never knew who it was. There was a man who stopped him. And my father is
on his way near the bridge.
Near the bridge. And delayed us by 5 minutes. That was the 5 minutes that gave my father and me life. Why didn't you describe what happened that time at the hospital?
Well, I spoke already about it. But what happened, that Dr. Braus, usually at 6 o'clock, he was already going to the ghetto, to his hospital. And when he came to this day, this 4th of October 1941, he came to pass the bridge. There was already closed. Nobody comes into the small ghetto, and nobody goes out. In the small ghetto was the Contagious Disease Hospital, headed by Dr. Braus, and they didn't let him in. He says, "I am the doctor of the hospital. I must be there. The people are waiting." Nothing. And you accompanied him. You were at the age of 14 at that time.
16.
And
16.
16. Well, I thought you were younger. Anyhow, it doesn't make really so both of you, and your father was in great distress to leave an hospital that he is heading just to the fate of the people. And very short after 6, the hospital was put on fire with the patients, with the doctors, with the administrative personnel, and also with the adjacent home of orphans of about 400, 300 orphans adjacent to the contagious hospitals. And the ghetto, the hospital was on fire. The people, the children were taken to the nice fortress together with another 1,000 of the small ghetto, and the small ghetto was liquidated. Toda rabah.
At that time, my father made a solemn commitment that the word of contagious diseases does not exist in the vocabulary. And that what led in the clandestine treatment of things. There were 2 people, as far as I know, you and Elkes, knew about it. I happen to know about it too, and I tell you a little about what happened. It's a very interesting thing, and my father described it in his memoirs. For some reason that we don't know, many of the contagious diseases like dysentery completely disappeared from the ghetto in spite of the terrible sanitary condition. My father's nightmare at that time was the excrement that were used. The winter was very cold. It was the coldest winter in the history, actually since Napoleon time. And my father was always saying, what will happen in the spring when all these excrements will start melting? But in spite of this, the dysentery disappeared. Diphtheria. Diphtheria is a disease that is curable, provided you use serum in the proper time. As you are aware, we didn't have diphtheria serum. And if we succeeded by clandestine method, my father succeeded, or you succeeded, from the ghetto, Eltestenrat, to get serum, it was always given too late. In spite of that, in all the records that my father kept, there was not one child that died of diphtheria and other diseases. But the real tragedy in the ghetto for my father was in 1942, when the Germans were defeated in Moscow. There were a lot of Spanish troops who didn't have proper clothes, the Blue Brigade. There were Germans who didn't have clothes, and they were amputees, sick, and by train they were sent by the Red Cross train, of German Red Cross train, they were sent back to Germany. However, being these people full of lice, because the hygienic conditions were worse in the German army of that part than it was in the ghetto. And being them full of lice and having typhus exanthematicus, which is a little different typhus from the typhus abdominalis, which is this typhus exanthematicus is transmitted through lice. So in Kaunas they established an Entlausungsanstalt, which means they delised the people.
The delising.
Delising. So the train would arrive and the patient would be taken out from the train, taken off, stripped from their clothes, shaven their hair, and their clothes were disinfected and the train was disinfected. There were 2 teams working. There was the Jewish team working on the dirty side, and there was a Lithuanian team working on the clean side. I don't know, it was by providence or whatever happened, the Lithuanian side people, workers there, developed typhus.
And the Jewish nurses, I don't know, I know it.
No, well, developed an epidemic, and many Lithuanians died. As a result, the Lithuanian health department immediately flooded the ghetto, and it is in your book written the dates they came and flooded, because they justifiably looked for the cause of the disease. But on the Jewish side, there were 74 cases of typhus exanthematicus that my father treated them. hid them, and he got from the Ältestenrat extra soap, extra consideration in moving the patient to certain parts, but he succeeded in treating the patients. Now, if you take an American textbook, Cecil, which is a top textbook, and you look up the page on typhus exanthematicus, you will find that the mortality rate on people who are not treated with any medication is 60+%. My father, in the 74 patients, had only 3 deaths. And the only 3 people were people who begged him to die. They said they would love to die in a bed. They are too tired to continue their life. And regardless, in medicine that I practiced for 40 years, I learned that when a patient does not have the will to live, he doesn't live.
That's right.
This was the job of my father. Now, I would like to mention a few recollections of my father.
It's too late. It's too late.
A few recollections
Fine, you have 10 minutes.
of my father. What a recollection. What do I remember of my father? I remember my father teaching me the morality of life, which the logic in life, morality, which I greatly appreciate. I also remember of few things of my father. My father practiced medicine for 40 years, like myself, and never sent a bill to a patient. And I always was wondering how he survived, but he did survive. And he always told me that the last bill he got paid was the heaviest payment he got. And I have to mention it because that's very important. There was a patient in 1938, a woman was brought to the Jewish hospital. She was very poor. The husband was working as a horse cleaner in the Jewish brewery in Lithuania, which happened to be a Jewish brewery. My father took care of her in 1938. My mother put packages of clothes for her. And I remember the house calls that my father used to make and take me because it was in Alexotas and I loved to go for a ride. In 1939, as you recall, the Germans took away the port of Klaipėda. The Lithuanians got very upset and took all the Lithuanians of German descent and sent them to Germany. This man knew only to clean horses. And in 1944, when my father and I and Dr. Nabrisky and Dr. Persikovich and Oleski got to Dachau, Lager 2, this man was the chief of command of the SS. He recognized my father and he extended the most unbelievable courtesy. In fact, he risked his life to help us. One of the things he did outside of helping us in food, and I have to mention later a few things, but basically he, when the first person died in Lager 2, my father wrote in a report, died of starvation. Well, to make a long story short, this report went to Berlin. They sent a commission, and the chief doctor of Dachau, who later was hung in the Nuremberg trial, was looking for my father to kill him because he wrote a report and a commission came to investigate, but at that time the German SS were stealing food and they were investigating exactly that problem. This SS man of my father's friend took my father out, and my father lived for 6 weeks in his house till the storm was over. And after the war, letters were written by Dr. Nabrisky and Dr. Persikovich to save this man from the gallows because he helped. The other thing I want to tell, I was in Israel one day and I went into a famous bakery, Kapulski, and I didn't know about it, but he recognized me, Kapulski, the son, and he immediately called his father and he kissed me and hugged me and said, "You don't know what your father did for me." At that time, the son was dying. He had no meat, no protein, and needed meat. My father asked this man to provide meat. He didn't, and the German obliged him. He brought meat for Kapulski's son to save him. But I was a Muslim myself, and I didn't have meat, and my father did not worry about me because I was not in the medical condition, medical physical condition that he. So this is the character of my father. But one of the most dramatic things of my father, which took me many years to understand, is when the Russians left Lithuania and the Germans advanced to Lithuania.
The man
But-
waits for us.
wait.
I cannot. I
Please,
must go.
please, please. When the men waited for, they postponed it, they called it, but let me finish it. Please, a sentence, that's a courtesy, okay? When the men, when the Russian Lithuanian government sent a car to pick up my father, and it was 12 steps or 15 steps from the second floor to go down, my father refused to leave and run to Russia, where his life and my whole family's life would have saved, because he felt he cannot abandon this patient in the hospital. I feel that my father, his morality, his philosophy, he lived by it, and he taught me the way of life. Sometimes I listened to him, sometimes I deviated a little from it, but I'm very grateful to his being him and teaching me the things that I taught. Thank you.
Perfect. Very good.
I feel bad about it because we have to cut out a few things. We made some comments here.
Uh-huh. Why? No. You always edit tapes.
Okay.
No, tapes.
Okay, I know that.
Tapes always.